Hey folks, welcome to another week of remote manufacturing. This week we want to try to tie together science and technology and manufacturing and actually get outside, get a breath of fresh air, and take a few photos of some interesting things that relate to what it is that we do in class. So this week what we're going to take a look at is classification. I wrote down a little definition for you here. In classification, what we're trying to do is categorize things based on shared characteristics and qualities. So things that are similar. If we wanted to identify how we categorize things, what we try to do is we start with observation. And science is actually a lot about observation, observing our natural world. And that's what we want to try to do. We want to be good observers. When we observe well, what we do is we see and we start to notice difference. Once we see and notice difference, we can then start to classify things or categorize those into different groups. And that's what we want to try to understand this week. So if we start with observation, the next thing we do to categorize is we actually differentiate. And differentiate is where we take some of those qualities or characteristics that we've recognized and start to separate those out so that we can put things into piles. And we can say these things are similar, they have similar characteristics or qualities, and we start to categorize those items. Once we're done with that, we then can understand what they do and how they do it. And that's really what we want to do as partially scientists in manufacturing, but more technologists. What we want to do is take that science from our categorization and our classification, understand that what makes things different, and then try to figure out how we can use that to our advantage in a technological standpoint. In our class, what we do is we make things out of wood and screws and glue. And what we want to try to do in our classification is to understand what are the differences between different types of wood. How do we recognize those things? What are their different characteristics and qualities? And if we really understand that, how we can use that to our advantage to make our products be the best that they can be. So let's take a quick look at how we can start to categorize things and see if you can get a better understanding of what that means. So again, our conversation this week is about classification. How do we categorize items based on shared characteristics or qualities? I have a big pile of miscellaneous hardware here. And what we want to do is see if we can't classify some of this material. If you remember how we start, if I can get my camera going, I want to start with observation. We're seeing and trying to notice and recognize difference. If I look at some of these things, I can see what I have is a variety of washers, a variety of nuts, another nut here, and some bolts. So if we took these hardware items and wanted to separate them out, it would be fairly easy for us to take the bolts out of the pile through observation. We understand what the bolt looks like, therefore we can classify those through our observation and see characteristics about them that are similar. We can see that this one has a big plastic end on it. It's actually an adjustable foot piece, but it too is a bolt. It has the threaded end on it. We can see this too is a bolt. Same threaded end, different end on the other side. But we can classify these two things because of their similarities. So we can get all of our bolts out. And what we've done is we've categorized those. We put a pile over here, a different group. We have differentiated. We have identified characteristics and qualities of all of these things that are the same. We can see that this is different. The nut is different because the thread is on the inside. On the bolt, the thread is on the outside.
So we can categorize this differently, and we can separate these out again through observation, looking for items that are threaded on the inside. I can separate those items out and we can end up with a new pile or a new category of items. We've considered the characteristics that make them similar. Again, threaded, a nut is threaded on the inside. There's quite a difference with this one. This one is quite a bit bigger, longer. Same thing though, threaded on the inside. We can also see this. This is a nut as well. And it's threaded on the inside. We can also see this. This is a nut too. It doesn't look like the typical nut that we think of, but it has threads on the inside. So we can categorize all of these items into the same pile. And then what we have left in our pile, because we only had 3 different items, are washers. And you can see that washers can be made of different materials, come in different sizes, and we can categorize those too. So now what we ended up with was we took all of our hardware, and what we were trying to do was classify it or categorize it, put it into different groups with similar characteristics or qualities. We saw all of our bolts have a similar characteristic where the thread is on the outside. We saw our nuts have a similar characteristic where the thread is on the inside. And we see our washers, which are flat round objects that separate the nut and bolt and provide a larger surface for our nut and bolt to grab to when we put it on the bolt and in between the head of the bolt and the nut. So we've classified those things. Now what we do is we actually begin to understand. And understanding what they do and how they do it. That makes us more knowledgeable. The more knowledgeable we are, the more able we are to utilize that information to our advantage. Taking that information to our advantage is technology. Our observation is the science side. Our understanding of what to do with that is our technology side.
Now we want to tie our knowledge to our classroom. We're going to take a look and classify our raw material. Our raw material is wood. Wood comes from trees. So we're going to spend a little bit of time taking a look at some trees. I thought this was an interesting paragraph about trees in Massachusetts. It says, despite many people's impressions of Massachusetts, it's a heavily forested state. In fact, at 62% forest cover, it is the 8th most forested state in the country. At the same time, Massachusetts also has the 3rd most densely population. There are few places on earth where there are so many people living among so many trees. The health of our Commonwealth is intimately linked to the health of our forests. So what kind of trees are in our forests? If we look at this list, this is the ranking of the top 10 trees in the state of Massachusetts. You can see the most prominent tree is an eastern white pine, followed by red maple and northern red oak. If you go outside and look at some trees, chances are some of the trees you're looking at are one of these 3. There are several other trees in Massachusetts, but we want to start to categorize what you have on your property. When it comes to the classification of trees, there are 2 major groups that we can classify trees into: deciduous trees and coniferous trees. Deciduous trees are the ones who are just starting to sprout their leaves right now. If you go outside and look, you'll see little buds on the tree, or maybe a little green or red hue around the tree that shows the little buds just starting. Coniferous trees are evergreen trees. They're green all year long. So if you look across your property now, you'll see the trees that are already green. Those are probably coniferous trees, evergreen trees, that maintain their leaves all year. Hey, for this week's project, what we want to do is scan our property. We want to take a look, see what is there. Do we have conifer trees? Do we have deciduous trees? What do they look like? How big are they? Are they easy to spot? We're going to classify the trees on our property. Okay, so we want to take a close look at that. So this week is all about trees. We want to get outside, take a look at some trees, and try to start to classify. Are the trees we're looking at deciduous trees or coniferous trees? I'm going to take a few photos, going to send them off to me. I'll put up some details up on Schoology. Have a great week, folks.